Our gospel this evening reminds us of the two great commandments, love of God and love of our neighbor. In the last several weeks, Father John and myself have been giving a series on Catholic social teaching in the bulletin about how to form our consciences for engaging in public life. And this kind of Catholic social teaching focuses really on how do we as Christians who love God, how do we practically also, in many ways, love our neighbor? And that's where the different concepts of our Catholic teaching come in. The ones we've covered: human dignity, common good, solidarity. Each of these are to assist us to know how to love our neighbor. And so this week we finished the bulletin series, and tonight I'll speak on the very last topic as well. And this one is maybe one that we're not as familiar with. It is subsidiarity. So, to kind of explain what this principle is all about, think about how we've talked about every human person has dignity that has to be respected. And our human nature makes us social creatures, that we live first within the life of our families, but then we also form local groups, associations, or institutions. And then they can get bigger and broader orders of society as well, including governmental jurisdictions on the local and state and national levels. And the principle of subsidiarity says that a community of a higher order should not interfere with the internal life of the community of a lower order, depriving the lower orders of their functions, but rather the higher orders should support the lower orders in times of need and help to coordinate its activity and the activities of all different groups within a society. Always, it says, with a view to the common good. So let's break that down. What does that all mean? So there's two main parts to what subsidiarity is. The first is that higher orders of organization should not interfere with the lower ones in what they themselves are able to do. But secondarily, the higher orders do have a kind of duty to provide assistance to the lower orders when it is appropriate. So let's see, how does this play out in practical terms? So we can see how this works, subsidiarity, within the church itself. You know, the church has kind of a hierarchical structure, starting with individual persons and your families. And then we have the structure of the parish and our parish grouping, and then we get higher into the diocese, and then it goes all the way up to, the Pope and the Vatican. And so this principle of subsidiarity says that the higher orders shouldn't interfere with the functionings of the lower orders when it's better for the lower orders to take care of things on their level. So as individual Catholics and families, you have the main responsibility of living out the faith for yourselves and for one another. And when it comes to the next higher order, like the parish, we're here to assist you and help provide things to support you in your ability to live that out. So, for example, one thing might be that the church always is going to defend the responsibility and right of parents to be able to raise your children in the faith. You're their first teachers. As a parish, we're going to try to assist you as best we can with providing things like schools and religious formation programs. But we never ever want to take your place. We want to assist you in being able to do your very important role in raising your family. So from this principle of subsidiarity then, if we continue to go up the diocese, will assist us as local parishes in various ways, like helping provide scholarships for students or marriage preparation program resources, as well as administrative support of our parish offices and other things like that. And it's because they assist us with those services do we then help also financially support the running of the next higher level through things like the Archbishop's annual appeal. So as we continue to move up kind of the hierarchy of the church, we get all the way to the Vatican, they don't really interfere at all with the day-to-day functionings of the life of the diocese, the life of the parish, or your individual Catholic lives either. But they do give us support and guidance, for example, in being able to understand God's teaching and what he gives us through the scriptures for us today. So this idea of subsidiarity, it plays out in the church, but it should also play out within the life of the secular world as well. So government isn't really a necessary evil, but there's positive aspects to it. It has a positive role in society on each level. Local, state, and federal governments have their proper place. So according to these two parts of subsidiarity, decisions should be made at the lowest level possible, but also at the highest level necessary. So national government shouldn't interfere with what state and local leadership can accomplish on their own, while at the same time there will be situations where maybe better service to the common good requires some assistance from the federal level. This idea of subsidiarity isn't exactly the same thing as the kind of American partisan debate upon the exact size and scope of what government ought to be. Subsidiarity doesn't give a specific size of what that ought to be. But Catholic social teaching does say that excessive intervention by the state can threaten personal freedom and initiative, while at the same time, higher orders have the right and responsibility to intervene when necessary to create the condition for human flourishing for individuals and families. And I think that's the essential point there, is that government intervention is supposed to be about human flourishing and the common good, and not about just those that are in power. So, when should we see higher orders coming in and assisting lower orders? And when should they refrain? Well, questions like that often depend on prudential judgments of the specific situations. And people of goodwill, including us as Catholics, who are attempting to follow Catholic social teaching, can legitimately disagree about the extent to which the different levels should play a part. Many social questions like, should this welfare benefit be provided to these people in this particular situation, doesn't necessarily admit of an answer that's binding upon all of us as Catholics. But what we are obliged to do is to try to find solutions to our contemporary social problems in light of the gospel and the best practical wisdom that we can have. So I'm going to give two practical examples that our bishops here within Nebraska, Archbishop Lucas and Bishop Hannafelt, have given us some guidance in this area. And while you may notice the church is rather tied down when it comes to talking about certain things like particular candidates and such like that, she can apply her principles more specifically and directly to initiatives that come by. And so there's two ballot initiatives, two topics that the bishops have given us some insight in for this year. One's having to do with payday lending as well as gambling. And so our Nebraska bishops urge us to vote for the initiative that will cap payday lending rates to prevent predatory business practices that can often exploit the poor. And it's interesting how the first reading for today, God actually addresses this very kind of situation. He says, if you lend money to one of your poor neighbors among my people, you shall not act like an extortioner toward them by demanding interest from them. So a couple weeks ago when I talked about the topic of the common good, I talked more about different things with economics, and that capitalism is capable of being compatible with Christianity, but there can be certain practices that can be abusive. So like predatory lending, for example, can be immoral. And this is a similar thing that can be applied to the second topic of gambling, where the bishops urge us to vote against the initiatives that would expand gambling. The church teaches that games of chance aren't in and of themselves immoral necessarily, but that to be moral, they have to have very specific conditions that need to be met, and unfortunately, the initiatives that are proposed don't meet those conditions. The arguments that we see often for this expansion are monetary or economic in nature. But as Christians, those kinds of issues aren't simply about money, but it's about serving human persons in their entirety. And so we know from data that there are clear social and moral costs that come along with allowing an expansion of gambling like that, such as negative family impacts, addiction, crime. True human flourishing, truly helping the common good, and expressing love for our neighbor is more than just a focus on money. So you can find more about these different issues in the Catholic Voice, has some articles on it, as well as the Nebraska Catholic Conference website has more information as well. As Father John and I conclude this weekend on this series of Catholic social teaching, we hope that these reflections on some of these topics on human dignity, the common good, solidarity, and subsidiarity can help all of us in thinking through the difficult, complex issues that our nation faces. May we be witnesses of the love of God and of the love of neighbor.